This is Ty Anderson for Add-in Express. We're going to do a little something different starting with this video, and that's present an end-to-end solution that covers 4 different videos. And what I want to do is walk you from beginning to end of creating a shared add-in using Add-in Express 2010. And over the course of the 4 videos, the idea here is to showcase what Add-in Express is all about and what it does well. And that is that they're shared across all of the applications within the Office suite. That's Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Visio, Project, Access, etc. And then also that you can make them to where they're version neutral and will work with Office 2010, Office 2007, and Office 2003, and even earlier versions. And then 2 or 3, that we can make them work on both the 32-bit and 64-bit versions of Office. And this last one, in terms of the bit insensitivity, that's really applicable to just Office 2010 that has both 32-bit and 64-bit versions of the applications. And that's the high overview of what we'll be doing over this end-to-end series. So part 1 here is building the graphical user interface of a shared add-in. So we're going to be focusing on this video with custom command bars, custom main menus, or customizing the main menu of an Office application, building a custom ribbon with a custom ribbon tab and buttons, and adding a context menu. And then the key here, we'll be doing this, but this is going to work not just with Office 2010, but I'm also going to show how it, or at least show how to make it work in Office 2003. And then when I actually demo this at runtime, we'll do Office 2010, and then we'll switch over to an Office 2003 installation that I have and show it working there as well. Alright, so let's get to it. What we're gonna do is I have Visual Studio 2010 open already on a Windows 7 machine, and I'm going to create a new project, just clicking the New Project button. And since I build a lot of add-ins using Add-in Express, my new project window is already open there, but as you can see inside of the installed templates, you go to the other project types and extensibility, and here you have the various Add-in Express or ADX project types. And here what we want is an ADX COM add-in. And what I'm going to do is call this, I'm going to save this to my ADX end-to-end series, and we'll call this part 1, building the GUI. And I'll say OK. So next up, what we have, this is the new Microsoft Office COM add-in wizard that ADX presents to us, and it's going to walk us through all the different steps and allows us to make some major decisions about our add-in. Luckily, I explained that at the beginning, and we know what we're going to do. In this case, I want to build a Visual C# project, so that's great. I have my choice here of Visual Basic as well, and if I had other languages installed, they would be available too, but I only have C# and VB installed. So in terms of my interop assemblies, the minimum supported Office version, and this is key. This is where we get into our decision of how far back in the Office history we want to support, or how generic we want to be with our Office support. So I could obviously do Office 2010, and that would allow me to have access to all the new widgets and everything inside of the Microsoft application suites, or each application suite's object model. Or I could begin to maybe make it a bit more restrictive and choose 2007, 2003, XP, or version neutral 2000 and higher, which is what I'm going to do here, is just version neutral 2000 and higher, which this really means as I'm coding things out, I need to be aware that maybe not everything's going to work. If I'm using something in Office 2010, that's not going to work if someone has an Office 2000 installation. So those are things you kind of need to be aware of if you're going to go version neutral. I'm going to go ahead and choose that and say Next. And here I can choose my supported applications. And what we have lit up here are all the applications that I have installed on my system. And as you can see, I have everything installed on my system, and it's available. So what I want to pick for this add-in is Excel, Word, Outlook, and PowerPoint. And I think this gives us a nice enough sample for a shared add-in. Good broad support across the application suite. So I'll click Next. And for the strong name key, I just want to create a new one. That's fine. I don't have one that I want to use. And click Finish. Clicking Finish obviously will create the project inside of Visual Studio, and we should see it pop up here at any moment within the Solution Explorer window up here on the right-hand side. Alright, and there we go. So automatically we have the add-in module.cs open, and this is our main class inside of the shared add-in or add-in express add-in. Has access to all of the ADX objects, and as well through that we have access to each of the application object models. And we also have a design surface, I'll just open that up as well, in which we can plop objects, add-in express objects that will allow us to code against the Office suite and to begin to build out our GUI. First thing I want to do is add a ribbon or an ADX ribbon tab, which is this button right here. So I'll go ahead and click that, and it'll add it to the design surface of the add-in module. I could have also right-clicked anywhere within the module and chosen it as well with with any of the other available objects that ADX provides. You could right-click, or you can use the toolbar here. So I want to rename. Just gotta give myself some more room, but I want to name this ribbon tab. We're going to call this the task add-in, and what we're going to build here is really just a simple task management or task creation add-in, where later on we're going to work with an Access database that manages tasks, and from any Office application I'm going to be able to create a task that's inside that database and could be used later for my own task management purposes, where I could print a report or anything like that. We'll build this throughout each of the 4 videos here, and this one mostly focused on the toolbars. So this will be the task add-in tab. It's great. And then the caption, we'll just call it My Tasks. And that's great. So now what I want to do, and we're going to keep this really very, very simple. This group, this add-in group here, I'm not really worried about its name, but I do want to change its caption to Quick Task Entry. And what this is going to allow us to do is I'm going to put, say, one of these ribbon boxes, and within the ribbon box I want to add 3 ribbon edit boxes, and I want to change the box style of the box to vertical. That's great. So here we'll name this task title and change its caption to task title. On this control, this is task start date. A label of start date. And this will be task due date. And we'll give you a caption of due date. That's great. And then one other thing I want to add is a button, and we'll call this button create task, and caption being create task. That's great. And also to the button size, I actually want to make, there it is, size. We'll change it to large. And now we can see just by looking at, and if I go to the actual tab, we can look down here and see this property called ribbons. And I'll click on the drop down here, and we can see that Add-in Express has already pre-populated this based off the options we chose in the wizard. So we have Excel Workbook. The defaults for when you choose Outlook support is the Outlook Mail Compose and Outlook Mail Read. I could change that if I wanted. I could say, do something like Outlook Appointment, maybe Outlook Contact too, just for demonstration. And then PowerPoint Presentation and Word document automatically taken care of for us. Now if we wanted to, we could add more support for it right here, right now. But that's good for our purposes in this demo. The end result here is a tab that looks great. It's going to look great in Office 2007 and Office 2010, but what about previous versions? Since this is a shared add-in that's going to work across multiple versions of Office, we need to make sure we have some elements that work with Office 2003 and earlier. So what we need to do is go back to the add-in module, and I'll right-click and say Add Command Bar, which could have done the same thing up here in the menu and said Add Command Bar as well. But what we want to do is we'll create this command bar so that it mimics at least some of the functionality that is in the ribbon. So I'm going to name this command bar task add-in command bar. And I'll make the designer a little bit bigger so we see the controls. And then what we'll do is I'll right click and add a button and then an edit box, and I can also choose edit box up here. I'll add a couple more of those, and I'm going to move the button down to the bottom so that's on the right hand side of the command bar. And what I want to start out with is I'll rename this command bar edit box as the task title CB edit box, or maybe we'll just call it CBE. That's great. And then for the caption, change it to task title. And now I'll select the second command bar edit and we'll change it to task start date CBE. And then for the caption, just make it say start date. And while I'm thinking about this too, we need to change its style. Instead of being the ADX MSO combo normal, I want it to be ADX MSO combo label so that the label is displayed beside it. So let's go ahead and select task title as well and do the same thing. And then we'll do that as well for the third command bar edit box. And now we'll move back up and we'll rename this one due date CBE and change the caption to due date. Now the button I'll change its name to command or CMD create new task, and its caption will be create task. Now we have basically the equivalent, command bar equivalent that will work with Office 2003 and earlier of the task add-in tab that we just created before this command bar. And the great thing about this is that Add-in Express will do the magic for us of deciding, okay, which is our host version of Office. Is it 2007? Is it 2010? Fine. We won't load the command bar. Instead, it will display the ribbon. And if it's 2003 or earlier, the ribbon obviously won't be used because those objects aren't supported. And ADX will instead create the command bar and do that. We don't have to do any code. That is handled for us magically with Add-in Express. Well, moving on, let's create now some customizations for the main menu. And again, we'll do two. One that would be kind of the Office button, or the circular button that's found within the ribbon, and then the other just the main menu that's separate from command bars, the file, edit, those main menus that are available in the previous versions of Office, Office 2003, etc. So I'll go to our designer, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a main menu, and I will call this main menu task add-in Excel, or we'll call it task add-in main menu Excel. And the reason for this is we get down to the supported app property and we look at the available options. Notice that I can only select one. In this case, I'm going to select Excel, and this means this menu will work for Excel. It's not going to work for any of the other applications. What I want to do now, then we'll create just one button here, and we'll call this CBB My Tasks Excel, and then the caption will just say My Tasks. And now this button will show up inside of the Excel main menu. I want to add a couple more to demonstrate that, if you want to support multiple apps, you're going to have to create more than one main menu. So I'll do this again. Actually, let's just copy and paste. And now, notice we have the same structure and everything, but I'm going to need to go in and change the names. So we'll do task, add in, main menu, Word. And just to make sure, yeah, I'm going to need to rename the command bar button. So we'll do CBB, main menu, Word. I don't think that's what I named it over here. Let's see here. CBB My Tasks. That's right. So let me change that. CBB My Tasks Word. Great. Keep the same caption, and then I need to reselect this because I set the targeted app. I need to reset that to Word. That's great. And now I'll select the main menu Word, copy it, and paste it. And we'll do this renaming exercise one more time. So task, add in, main menu, PowerPoint. I'll go ahead and make the window a little bigger so you can see that hopefully in one view there. We don't have to scroll or anything. And then I'll change the supported app to PowerPoint, and I need to select the My Task button and change that name as well. CBB My Tasks PowerPoint. Now let's build the ribbon customization for the Office main menu or the Office ribbon. So we'll right click on the designer of the add-in module and say Add Ribbon Office Menu, and I'll change this to be task, add in Office Menu. And instead of supported apps like we find with the main menu control, this property here, what we have with the task add in Office Menu or the ADX ribbon Office Menu, like with the task add in tab, is the ribbons property where we can select the ribbons that will be supported by this control and ultimately our shared add-in. And by default, we have PowerPoint presentation, Word document, Outlook Mail Read, and Outlook Mail Compose, as well as Excel Workbook, just like we had with our custom ribbon. I'm going to leave those exactly as they are. Now what I want to do, I'll select in the designer the task add-in Office Menu, and I'm going to add a control, or excuse me, a ribbon button. And again, the ribbons properties will be, they'll match our Office Menu ribbon. And what I want to do is change the button to say Office Menu My Tasks, and then the caption to say My Tasks as well. And what this will do when I show this in demo mode or in runtime mode, we'll have this button, this My Task button, will show up underneath the menu of the Office menu, or the circular button that's part of the ribbon inside of Office 2007 and Office 2010. Although actually in Office 2010 it's not circular; it's looks more like a tab now. But the point's the same, and it brings me to the next thing we want to do, which is to build a Backstage customization, and the Backstage customization is unique to Office 2010, whereas what we just built will really work inside of 2007. The Office 2010 really needs us to build a Backstage item. So on the designer, we'll add a Backstage View. We'll put it right under this one since they're kind of related. And we'll walk through just adding the different components that we'll need. And the Backstage is meant to be kind of tasks and activities. It's a place for putting tasks or great things like configuration. So since this is a shared add-in that's used for my task, what I'm going to do is we'll build out just a little section for the Backstage that will allow us to change the location of the database that we use if we so desire, and also to edit some of the data. And those will come again in other versions or future parts of this video series. So go ahead and change the name of this Backstage to the task add-in Backstage View. And what we're going to do is create a tab, and I'll change this to the task add-in Backstage tab. And we'll notice now we have two columns, and the way the Backstage works is we can create multiple columns. I'm just going to leave this with 2 columns, and we're going to place everything inside of the first column. And I'm going to add a Backstage task form group, which I will call, I'm going to leave the names, kind of use the defaults for that, and worry more about changing the caption names. And I'll say my tasks configuration, and I'll give it a little bit of helper text that makes some sense. Update my tasks add in settings. We'll just do that. Call it settings. That's great. And now we need to add a task form group category, and I'll change its caption to say database selection. So this group category will contain the controls used for selecting a different database. And I'll add another task category, and we'll call this one, or change the caption to it to task data. And now inside of database selection, we can add the task form group task control, and I'll change its caption to be database location. And now I can add a Backstage group, which, as you can see, we have primary items, top items, and bottom items. But for this group, I'll change its caption to be edit database location. And change the helper text to be change my database location. Or actually, that's somewhat confusing. So I'll say select my tasks database. That works. That's good. Okay, so now in the primary items, what I want to do here is add just a regular button here, and this one I do want to change its name to be button select database Backstage, and the caption will be select database. And this button we'll use to allow the user to browse on the file system to find the database. And that's going to be the primary item. And the top items, we can add different controls to it. I could add like a label control that could display the current location of the database if I wanted, but I'm not going to worry about that for this demo, so I'll right-click and delete it. And there's a great article on the blog section of Add-in Express that covers the Backstage in depth in all the different objects in it, and like the primary item, the top item, and the bottom items. I suggest reading that in depth, as it will add even more detail to what I'm doing here. But as you can see, there's a lot of objects that need to be nested in a hierarchy that needs to be built before we can actually get to, hey, I want to add a button and some combo boxes, edit boxes, those sort of things. But here we are. Now for the task data, we'll go ahead and add another Backstage task form group. And I'll select that, and I'm going to change its caption to be maintain task data. And now I want to add a Backstage group to it, and this one will change its caption to be add edit task categories. And the idea for what we'll do with this group is provide the user some means to edit category data that's attached to the database that we'll be using inside of this shared add-in. So in the primary items, I want to add a button, and we'll change its name to button edit categories Backstage, and the caption will say categories. And then for a helper text right here within on the primary item helper text, I want to say add new categories or edit existing categories. Okay. Now I'll scroll back up to the top and select my task add-in Backstage View and make sure that all our ribbons have defaulted to what we want. And also too, I want to show you that I could have built this out. I didn't have to use the designer that displays in add-in module. I could have selected the ellipsis here on the controls property, and a dialog box would show, and I could fill everything out right there as well. So now we need to address one other item, which is the actual location for the tab, the ADX tab, Backstage tab, and I'm going to change its name to My Tasks. We'll just leave it at My Tasks, and we can change the position by inserting a value either in the insert before ID MSO or the insert after MSO. And for our purposes, we want to place this above the options dialog box. And what we need to do is insert the ID of the options dialog box here in the insert before ID MSO. And you can find these on the Microsoft site, and you just need to search for Office 2010 control IDs in the Microsoft.com/downloads page, and you can find the download that lists all these. There's a series of Excel files that list every control ID within Office 2010. And to put our tab above the options dialog on the file tab, we'll place this. We'll insert application options dialog, and that value will cause this to populate right above the options tab on the file menu. So between then the Office task add-in Office menu that allows us to customize the Office button that is on Office 2007, and then the Backstage View that allows us to build out a Backstage View for our add-in, we can cover both Office 2007 and 2010. Lastly, I want to show how to create context menus, and like with the previous objects, we'll do something that works with Office 2010, and then we'll do something that works with the previous versions of Office. And with Office 2010, we have the ribbon context menu, which is available right here in the toolbar, as well as with a right click to show the context menu, and we can show the add ribbon context menu. So let's rename, after dropping it on the designer, let's rename it as the task add in ribbon context menu. And then for, just like everything else ribbon related, we can choose the different ribbons we want. Again, we're going to leave it with the defaults. And I'll add the ADX ribbon button. I'll go back up to its name prop, and we'll call this button the button create task context menu, and the caption I'll set as create task. Whoops. Create task. And now we're all set. This ribbon, this context menu will show up in Office 2010 for us, and will apply anytime the ribbons defined here in this property are in play. For Office 2007, 2003, 2000, and earlier versions, the context menu is part of the command bar object model. Not in even 2007, it's a key differentiation with 2010 is the context menus are not part of the ribbon, and the add-in ribbon context menu, or the ribbon context menu, will not work with 2007. It's done through the command bar context menu structure of previous versions of Office. So to support that kind of context menu, what we do is we go to the designer, the add-in module designer, and we will right-click and add a context menu, which gives us the ADX context menu, which in our case I want to call this the task add-in context menu. And like with the main menu objects, we need to select the supported app. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to choose Excel. We're not going to worry about repeating it for other applications. So Excel will be the one that we support. And now what I want to do is add a command bar button, and we'll rename this the task add-in. Actually, we'll name this CBB create task context menu. And the caption, like all the other create task buttons, will simply be create task. Now let's select the context menu object again and round out its properties. The big thing we need to do is change the command bar name to the command bar we want to attach our control to, or our button. In this case, we want it to be the cell context menu. And this little, but just by adding that, when we right-click inside of Excel, inside of a cell, our create task will be at the very bottom of that context menu. Now that we have our context menus the way we want, we're really ready to create a setup package and install our add-in, and so then I can demo it. And what we'll do is we'll run it just by hitting F5, and we'll run this in debug mode so you can see this work inside of Office 2010. And then what I'll do is I'll compile a setup package and install it on another system that I have, and we'll kind of fade to black and fade back into light. And when I do that, we'll be in a system that I have that's running Windows 7 but also is running Office 2003, and I'll run the same demo run through all the different objects that we created, and you can see them working within Office 2003. To start the demo, we'll just start with the environment I have now, which is Windows 7 and Office 2010. I'm going to start out by compiling the add-in, and once successful, I can register it. Again, that's under the Build menu item, and say Register ADX Project to register it on the system, which what Add-in Express does is create the registry settings that will tell Office that the add-in exists and that Office should load it when the target applications such as Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, and Word execute. Since I'm not debugging, I really don't need to worry about starting debugging or hitting F5. So I'll just go ahead and open up Excel. We'll start with that. I'll show Excel and Word, and we'll take these as we created them. First is My Task. We see our My Task tab with the quick entry or quick task entry group with our task title, start date, due date, and our create task controls. And if I go over to the File tab, we'll see down here above the Options dialog the My Tasks group, and we'll see how we just built this out, which is the My Task configuration. We can go to two different groups, the database selection and the task data, and notice that what happens over here on the right hand side changes. So under database selection, I have my select database button, and under maintain task data we have the add edit task categories and the categories button. And lastly, if I can click in any of the cells, right click to view the context menu, and then I can see the create task context menu button that we created. So that's Excel, and we'll show Word 2010 briefly. We have the My Tasks tab, just like we should, and again we'll see our My Tasks tab in the Backstage View. And if we right click anywhere on the document, we're not going to see anything because we didn't build a context menu that targets Word. So that's Office 2010. Now to show you the same shared add-in working with Office 2003, it's going to look a little different because there's no ribbon, but we'll see the command bar tools that we built out, as well as the context menu and the main menu controls. So what I'll do now is I'm going to create a setup project, and I can do that by right-clicking the project and saying Create Setup Project. And I have some options. The new Setup Project wizard, I'm going to use the Visual Studio installer. I'm going to take the defaults, say Next. In terms of localization, I'm going to take the defaults. And now I have a setup program, and I can now build it. Well, that error there, I need to rebuild here. So build. Now I should be able to build my setup project. There we go. And once done, what I'll do is I'll just fade the video to black, and I'm going to install the add-in on my Office 2003 system, and then I'll light it back up and run you through the application with Office 2003. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back in just a mere seconds. Actually, it took me a couple minutes just to get this installed, but for you, it looks like a second or two. But this is my Office 2003 system. It's on Windows 7, and what I'm going to do is just run through exactly what we just did for Office 2010. So I'll go to the Start menu, and I'll choose Excel 2003. And once it loads, we will see our custom command bar, and I didn't really give it a good name when we were configuring it. And we'll see ADX command bar 1 here. Should have probably called it My Task, but I didn't. But we see our task title, edit box, the start date edit box, the due date edit box, and our command bar button for creating a task. Then in the main menu, we have the My Task button. And then if we move into a cell, we're going to see our context menu just with a right click and create task. So everything's working just as we should. There's no errors or anything with caused by having ribbon controls and command bar controls inside of the shared add-in. And now let's take a look quickly at Word 2003, where we should expect to see everything we just saw in Excel except for the context menu. So yes, we do. We see our command bar and then the My Tasks button, and if I right click within the document, we're not going to see anything as we didn't have a context menu targeting Word. So the key takeaway here is building out your graphical user interface for your shared add-ins is easy. Add-in Express does all the work. If you're targeting different versions of Word, different versions of Office with the different kinds of objects like command bars and ribbons and all that, it's just a matter of using the right objects that will work within the applications you're targeting and the versions you're targeting, and Add-in Express will then display those for you without you having to write any code, depending on which version of Office the user is running. So in future videos, we're going to look at enhancing this. At least in part 2, we will enhance further the graphical user interface using things like advanced form regions and advanced task panes. We'll probably add some icons to our buttons as well, and I'll show you how to do that. And then we'll move on into adding code and functionality and business rules that build out the rest of this task add-in. That's it for now. It's probably long enough video this time around, and we'll see you in part 2.